I have kept one painting on the mantle of my ranch house for going on 4 years now, and every man who's walked through that door has had something to say about it. Some say it favors her well. Some say they never knew Mira Darden had eyes that color. A few go quiet, the way men do when they've glimpsed something they weren't prepared for. I tell them all the same thing. A traveling woman named Nell Hart painted it. And I don't say anything more than that, because what came after the painting is mine to keep. She arrived on a gray October morning, the kind that smells like iron and coming snow. I was at the fence line when my foreman, a lanky boy named Rudd, came out to tell me a woman had ridden up the lane asking for the Darden place. I walked back to find her standing by a mud-spattered mule, a battered case strapped behind the saddle. She was maybe 30 years old, plain in her dress, her brown hair pinned back under a felt hat that had seen harder weather than most men I knew. She carried herself straight, the way people do when they are tired, but have decided not to show it. She told me she had heard of my wife's passing. She said she painted memorial portraits, likenesses of those who died, worked from a family's descriptions, and that she charged a fair rate for the work. She had a worn leather folio with her, and she opened it on the porch rail to show me samples. Pencil studies mostly, a stern grandfather, a young soldier in a stiff collar, a woman holding a Bible, the likeness so careful I could see the threadwork on her cuff. I told her I'd think on it, and offered her the bunkhouse loft for the night, since Rudd's boys were out on the South Range, and the weather was coming in. I didn't think I'd say yes. 3 years I had gone without a portrait, and I had told myself I didn't need one. By morning I said yes. She set up her easel in the kitchen, where the north light came flat and honest through the window. She asked me to sit across from her. Not to be painted, just to talk. She said she needed to understand a person before she could find their face. It was the strangest morning of my life after Mira's passing. She asked me what color Mira's hair had been in summer, and whether it was the same in winter. She asked which hand Mira had used for her needlework, and whether she held her needle differently when she was concentrating. She asked what Mira had laughed at, and whether the laugh reached her eyes before it reached her mouth. She had a small notebook, and she wrote things down in it. She wasn't writing what I said. She was writing the shape of it, the angle and the lean of a person I was trying to hand back to her out of memory. Nobody had ever asked me those things. 3 years of neighbors and churchmen and well-meaning women at the Mercantile, and not one of them had asked me what Mira's laugh looked like. I told her. I talked for 2 hours, and I am not a man who talks. Rudd came in for coffee and stared at me like I'd started speaking a foreign tongue. Nell Hart wrote and listened and asked the next question, patient as stone, and when I finally ran dry, she thanked me and said she would begin the sketches that afternoon. She worked for 4 days. I fed her at the kitchen table, and she ate without fuss, cleaned her own plate, and gave me a word or two of thanks without overdoing it. She took her walks in the evening, out to the far pasture where the creek bent west, and she came back with mud on her boots and color in her cheeks and never asked for a thing I hadn't offered. On the second day, 2 men from town, Hetch brothers, the older pair of the family that ran the feed store, and half the bad opinions in Callaway County, rode in for a look at the yearling stock I had for sale. They saw Nell at her easel through the kitchen window, and Hetch the elder made a remark. He said something about brush peddlers and women who traveled alone. The kind of remark a man makes when he wants to sound clever and only manages to sound small. He said it loud enough she could have heard him through the glass. I stepped between them and the window. I didn't raise my voice. The lady was a guest on my ranch and a professional at her trade, and that they were welcome to look at the yearlings and be on their way, or they were welcome to ride back to town without doing either. Hetch the elder opened his mouth and looked at my face and closed it again. They bought 2 yearlings and left without another word. Nell didn't mention it that evening. She thanked me for supper and asked whether Mira had favored any particular color in her dress. I said she had liked blue, color of the sage when the light hit it sideways in late afternoon. Nell said that was a beautiful thing to remember, and she said it like she meant it. On the 4th day she turned the canvas around. I want to be careful how I tell this part. I had braced myself for a likeness that was close. A good likeness is what you'd hope for. and as I expected good work because I'd seen it in the folio. What I had not braced myself for was the expression Nell had given her. Not the formal expression I'd feared, the grave Sunday portrait look. This was Mira at the kitchen window. In the morning, the half-turn she'd make when she heard my boots on the step before she knew I was watching. The expression a woman makes, for no one in particular, before she puts on her company face. The expression that belongs to the people closest to her and to no one else. I don't know how Nell Hart found that in 4 days of questions and sketches. I stood there in my own kitchen and could not say a word. After a moment she said she hoped it was right. She said she had tried to paint the woman I was describing, not the memory of her. I paid her twice what she'd asked. She counted the money and looked up and told me that was too much. I told her it wasn't near enough. She considered that and folded the bills into her coat pocket. She had her mule saddled by mid-morning the next day. The weather had cleared, the sky gone that deep October blue, and the trail south would be good going. Rudd was pretending to fix a latch on the far side of the corral and watching us from under his hat brim. He is not subtle. I carried her case out to the mule for her. She tied it behind the saddle and checked the girth the way a person does who has made 1,000 cold. Morning departures alone, efficient and quiet and a little practiced in not looking back. Told her she was welcome to winter here if she needed a place to work. I said I knew of 3 other families in the county who'd lost someone in recent years, and that a person of her skill could find steady work in the valley through spring. I said it like it was practical information. I suppose I believed at the time. She stood with her hand on the mule's neck and looked at me with those steady eyes of hers, the kind of eyes that don't let a person hide much. She asked if I was sure I wanted a brush peddler cluttering up the bunkhouse. I said the bunkhouse was too cold. She could have the spare room off the kitchen. She was quiet for a moment. Then, she said she would stay through winter and see how the work went. She is still here. We married in the spring in the Callaway County Church. Small and plain, just Rudd and the minister and 2 of the families whose people she had painted that winter. Mira's portrait hung at home above the mantel, where it hangs yet. It seemed right to leave it there. Nell thought so too. She said a person who loved someone that well deserved to stay on the wall. That is the kind of woman she is. She sees things for what they are, and she doesn't ask them to be otherwise. I told you men go quiet when they look at that portrait. Some of them look at it, and then look at Nell, and they work something out on their own. I let them.